The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Holy and gracious God, we give you thanks that you've given us this day to gather around our diocese to pray and praise you and to worship, to break bread and to be put back together again. We give you thanks for giving us moments of Sabbath rest, and we pray that as we enter and prepare to enter a time of sabbatical as both bishop and diocese, that you would be with us in abundance, helping to restore us and to renew us and to prepare us for the ministry that you call us to. We ask your presence with us in this time as we share together about how we would hope this time to be. Help us to dream deeply so that we may rest and be renewed. And all these things we pray in Jesus Christ, our Savior. Amen. All right, everyone. Thanks for making some time to be together today. For some of you who remember deep in the pandemic, we would gather on Zoom for these kind of fireside chats. I'm in my office, so there's no fire and it's 60 degrees. So we're not quite doing that. But the spirit of these were that we could just have conversation about the topic of the day. And the topic for today is our sabbatical time. I want to always be careful to say that though the reality of it is that I, as your bishop, am taking sabbatical and will be leaving the system, it is a sabbatical time for all of us. And so the rhythms of the diocese shift, I'm hoping, when I'm on this time, when I'm not actively leading. And if I think about anything about my hopes for all of us is that this time of changing the pace and the rhythm would be a source of renewal for all of us, knowing that the ministry that you all are a part of will continue to go apace. But I'm also aware that there is a particular pacing and spirit to our life together that emanates from my office here, and it'll be different when I'm not in the chair in that active way. So we'll talk a lot about all kinds of things that you might have in terms of questions, things that you wonder about for this time. But I want you to hear at the very outset that is one of my hopes, is that as a whole diocesan community, we would be able to have a little bit of a sabbatical spirit to our time this year. One of the other things I'm hoping that we'll be catching on to as we do that is, as you know, I proclaimed this a year of rest, and I recognize that term is, it's a little aspirational because you all are continuing to work really, really hard through the year, but I'm really determined to have my team here support you in doing the work that you're doing without adding new and additional initiatives and things. For some of you who are newer here, particularly from the table, one of the things that you'll want to know is that because we had launched so many things in 2020 by sort of accidents of opportunity and just circumstance, that we've been pushing pretty hard for the last few years in the midst of a pandemic, sort of trying to respond in the ways that are key to our diocesan mission, and collaborating and looking and examining the places where we have opportunities to do work of repair and to look at our buildings and our congregations as mission centers, all of these things which have asked a lot of all of you. So there's only so much that we can do at that pace for so long. And so we're sort of taking a bit of a breather, because what I would hope is that on the other side of sabbatical year, we would be like ready to go for whatever is next, because there's always something. And I'm clear that you can't sustain a hard driving pace forever. And there's nothing in our theological tradition, in our Christian tradition, that would support that, because resting on the Sabbath day, declaring a year of Jubilee, when we have a time to let things sort of slow down and lay fallow and reset, that is deep, deep, deep in our DNA as a faith community. So I'm hoping that we can kind of claim a little bit of that spirit. So what I want to do with this time is just to talk for a little bit, and then to ask what questions you might have about things. And because I'm sure that even as I lay out some of the basics, some of which you, I think, may have read in some of the other communications, that there are other things I haven't thought of or that we need to be thinking of. And I want to make sure that while we still have a few months before sabbatical begins, that we are paying attention to those things. So the basic outline is that the sabbatical time, which includes my regular vacation time, will take place from May 1 through September 5th of this year. And what I'm finding right now is that as we lead up to that, it is a pretty jam-packed spring with all of the regular things, plus some attempts to do some things that help us to be together in some substantial ways before I begin sabbatical time. So for instance, having the diocesan regional confirmation in April, right before I depart, as a way to have us gather for those important rites in the spring, as we might normally do, but to do it a little bit earlier than typical. So we have a tradition which we've let go fallow for the last few years of doing an Ascension Day, Ascension evening service of confirmation. So we're moving that to April so that we wouldn't have to delay that till the other side of sabbatical. April 29th or so is sort of my last big day, and then we begin sabbatical time on May 1. And I will confess to you that in the planning for sabbatical, my desire is to really be off, but there are 2 commitments that I made previously that I'm going to be keeping. So I want you to know about that. So when you wonder, why is the bishop dressed up in robes? It's May 20th. That's weird. Then you'll know why. I've been honored to have been given, or will be given, an honorary degree, and have been asked to preach the baccalaureate service for Franklin College, which was delayed a year. And so I'm making an exception to do that, to receive that honor in May. And then the Bishop Coadjutor of New York is being consecrated the next day. And so I've been asked to co-consecrate Bishop elect Matt Hyde in my home diocese of New York City. So I'm going to go back for that. But unless there's something extraordinary, which would have to be something as an unfortunate extraordinary circumstance, that is the only thing I plan to do that looks like regular bishoping during those 4 months. I'm hoping, though, to spend the time that I am on sabbatical just doing a lot of resting, a lot of reading, and a lot of running, maybe, and some cooking. So that's, I mean, it's pretty easy. There are some bishops who take sabbatical time and they spend some time teaching at seminaries or working on books. And I have no desire to do any of those things because I know myself. It's really, I have a hard time just shutting things down. And if I'm in for a little bit, like I can't turn things off. It'll be enough already. Like you'll always be on my mind and in my heart. But if I put myself in extended church spaces, I know that that's kind of where I'll live. And so this sabbatical time is really about doing the things that I love to do, which is resting and reading and running. So there is a document that we will make available to you by a link, which has to do with identity and belonging. And this essay with some questions, which I'm going to ask the diocese to consider at some point as part of your kind of being tied to the time I'm away, something to reflect on related to the work I'm going to be doing. It was something that I discovered from the Society of St. John the Evangelist, and it really gave me the idea of how I want to spend this time, which is asking the question about how groups form identity and belonging outside of the church space. So what I'm watching are folks who are spiritual but not religious, have nothing to do with the church, but do the things that we are about as church people, which is gathering in community, doing it on a regular basis, sometimes 2 to 3 days a week with these running groups, doing community service, doing mutual support and care, and finding that that's essential community for them in the ways that I desire people to find the church to be an essential community. And so I'm going to spend some time immersing myself in those communities to see what it is that draws people over and over again to those spaces in hopes of understanding what belonging looks like in places that are not the church. And there may be something that comes out of that on the other side of sabbatical, but maybe not. We'll see how the summer goes. It's really trying to be open to just asking questions and seeing what comes out of those, but there's no predetermined outcome about something that might be produced out of that. I will be on social media to some degree when I'm on that, so you might be able to follow along on Instagram, but I'm probably going to step off of Facebook and Twitter and things like that, so I can really just take a break in that sense of the word and kind of have a reset with my relationship with social media. So if you're wanting to wonder about like, where am I running? You'll be able to keep up with me there. My goal is to do most of my travel, some of the travel in the United States, and to take a couple of weeks to go off to the UK to spend some time in England and Scotland, visiting various groups and just exploring. And that'll be some time with family. Harrison and Timothy will travel with me during that time. And then the other trips domestic will just be me, because Timothy doesn't really have sabbatical and Harrison definitely doesn't have sabbatical. So there'll be that kind of a rhythm, but surely a lot of the summertime will be about catching up with some substantial time with family, which, as you can imagine, is something that we don't get in lots of abundance right now. So I'm excited about that, and being able at the end of sabbatical time in September to come back really refreshed and ready for whatever the next phase of our ministry together is. So one of the things that you'll expect when I return is that I'll have some opportunities to kind of knit myself back together into the life of the diocese. Some of that will be with some intense time with staff. Some of it will be with our annual Holy Cross Ember Day, spending a time with clergy. That's September 15th-ish or so. We'll have that on the calendar. And then as we prepare for our convention in November, there are all those fall meetings. I'm going to come to every single one of them around our neighborhoods, and to hope that we can gather over a meal and both do the bit of reconnecting and convention preparation that we typically would do in those gatherings. So they'll look a little different than they have in the past. They won't be over Zoom. They'll be, pretty substantial, so that we can all have some time together to kind of catch up with each other's lives. A couple of other things you should know in terms of what happens when I'm away is that I'm super grateful for having an incredible staff team here who will continue to do all the things that we do while we move through the months of May through September, early September. So Canon Kristen and Canon Brendan, Janet, Jen Phelps, Kim Christopher, Mary Tafflinger, like all of the things, all the folks who have been serving and those who will be coming on board in the capacities for youth ministry and communications, all of that will continue apace. And so if you're asking, like, what are they going to do? They're going to do the things they always do, sort of show up, support, help us do the work we're called to do as a diocese. And we've been talking a lot about, how do they have the support in case something extraordinary happens. You may have read that we'll have sort of bishops on call. Bishop Doug Sparks in Northern Indiana will continue to be our partner, and he'll be backup bishop for us, even ordaining, God willing, and the people consenting, ordaining Yuri Rodriguez to the priesthood on my behalf in June. Bishop Dion Johnson from Missouri will be also on call with a particular care for for pastoral care of clergy and lay leaders when or if that's necessary. We will be, I think, in really, really good pastoral hands here. So that's one of the gifts of being able to take this time away, is knowing that there are really good folks who can step in when necessary. But Bishop Kate, who still is retired, is still here in the diocese. So, we're kind of lousy with bishops, as they say, who will be able to provide whatever kind of support is necessary if called upon. Folks have asked, how, like, when do you let me know something's going on? And I sort of talk about, well, if a prominent lay leader or a clergy person dies, I'm going to want to know about it. If there's a fire or loss of property in the diocese, I'm going to want to know about it. And because I learned this experience when I was in Chicago, when Bishop Lee went on sabbatical, if a congregation decides to end its ministry, I'm going to want to know about that too. So my goal is to get through sabbatical without you having to call me at all about any of those things. That's the goal. Like, but if God forbid any of those things do happen, I would want to know. And so we'll handle those if and when they come up. But that's, if you're wondering, like, what's the thing, that's the thing. And if you're in doubt, you can always call one of the canons and they will know how to make the judgment call about calling me about the thing or not. So that's a whole bunch of stuff. I'm going to stop there and then ask if there are questions, if there are any major details that I didn't touch on that you wonder about. I'm looking at my list. I think I've gotten all the big things, but what do you wonder about? What do you, and particularly, what are you sort of worried or concerned about? If there are things that you're going, well, what about this? Like, don't hold it back. It may be something that I want to know about so that we can plan while we still have 3 months yet before sabbatical begins to take it, take note of it and address it before May. So what do you wonder about? And, we're on Zoom, so we're learning how to do this again. You can unmute, you can raise your hand with the raise hand feature, or you can raise your physical hand and I can call on you. Or you can also put a question in the chat. We'll monitor that as well.
Bishop, I got one for you.
Yes.
You said a date and I didn't catch it. What is the day at which you then declare that from this moment forward, I am now on sabbatical?
May 1.
All right. Because it seems to me that's not only important for you to know, it's important for us to know, but it's probably more important for you to know that it actually starts then.
Yeah. And it's funny because April 30th is the day that I was seated at the cathedral. And so it feels like having this big, that's the anniversary of that date in 2017. So I feel like doing that confirmation service will be that's a Sunday afternoon. And then the next day is May 1. So, it's a bit of a sort of a send-off opportunity too. But yeah, May 1 is the beginning. And it's good too, because I feel like, as Janet will tell you, every single other minute of my life seems to already be scheduled between now and April 30th. So like May 1 is that's the date. All right, what else do you wonder about? Well, Janet gets some vacation time. Yeah, so Janet's really lucky. She can also speak for herself, but I believe the best conference, the Bishop's Executive Secretaries Together, which is her community of colleagues and peers, they're going to be in Portland. Is that right? Janet, you want to say something about what you're going to do in May?
That's right. They're going to be there the first week of May. So I fly out on May the 1st. For that conference, and I fly home when that's done, and then I fly to Florida to go on a cruise with my cousins. Yay!
So, it's a good question, because one of the things that you may not always track on is that the wisdom for bishops' executive assistants is that they should take vacation when a bishop takes vacation, because it can be hard to be away with the bishop. It's just, that's wisdom has shown that that's a good time. So those dates happen to coincide in that way. But I really do hope it's a more restful time for Janet, because we need her to be around for a long time as well. The question was asked too. I think Ken was wondering about when was the last time I took a sabbatical. And I'll say, it's really funny. I took my first and only other sabbatical in 2016. And so I had started planning for it in 2015 and had not expected that I would be in the bishop search in the year of 2016, but took sabbatical. I remember there was the discernment retreat in May, and then I went on sabbatical in June and came back in October and went straight into the walkabouts. So that was really helpful. It was because I was rested for that, but I hadn't taken a sabbatical before. And in our tradition, not bishops, but just all clergy are invited particularly if they are working full time, to take sabbatical every 6 years or so, 6 to 7 years. And so I had moved and switched calls at just the right time. So I never was quite eligible for sabbatical time. So when I was in Chicago, they said, well, we'll let you take it in year 5. So I took it in year 5, and then I left 2 months after I got back, which is not what I would recommend. So I'm saying that to you, that is not normal. My plan is to come back and to actually be here for another, God willing. I mean, I try to think of it in sort of these 5 to 10 year chunks of time. And so I am 56 years old, and I want to be here until I retire, which is not going to be at the age of 72, just to let you know that, which is the required resignation, retirement age for clergy. But I want to make sure I have enough energy through my 60s to be your bishop. And boy, I will say, some of you have heard the same, I've heard me say this before, that a few months ago, even, I was thinking, I don't know if I can really separate myself and be on sabbatical fully, like to really just let everything go and not really have my head in the, like, can I really just not be working? I don't think I could do it. I had this conversation with my spiritual director, kind of confessing, like, what am I going to, like, how do I get myself in that space so that I can really rest? And then, I don't know, I think sometime around late January, I was like, oh, I can do it. I'm going to be ready. Like, there was just the pace was enough where I feel like, even though I had a sabbatical in 2016, I am really, really ready, because that break, I think, is good, not just for my, it's not even my physical health, it's my spiritual and my mental health, sort of having a bit of a cleanse there. And so because when I come back, I want to come back hungry and ready and energized. I'll say one of the things that I do think about is that our diocese doesn't have any recent familiarity with having sabbatical time with the bishop. Bishop Kate took her one sabbatical fairly early on in her tenure. So I'm going to say it must have been about 20 years ago that we as a diocese experienced having a bishop on sabbatical. So, you know, that's a long time. So I'm hoping that we'll, you know, have this as a part of our regular rhythm of life. Leanne.
Thanks. Bishop Jennifer, I love the theme that you've picked for your sabbatical and for us as well while you're gone. And I'm just curious if you have some ideas about what we can do for our own rest and restoration as you're doing yours in a more sort of formal sabbatical way. But what do you hope to find, what state do you hope to find us in when you return, I suppose? How can we rest while you're away resting and we're still here resting?
Well, thank you for that question. I mean, there are lots of different schools of thought about how to do diocesan sabbaticals. And, you know, in my mind, thinking about what I would have done if I were in a congregation, and some bishops have done this too, to say, you know, here's this book I want you to read and to reflect upon, and then you'll think about it together. But the article that we posted in the chat and that we'll link through is a much briefer thing, because I would love for us to all be wondering about belonging and identity. And there's some questions that invite some reflection. And so there'll be some more to say about this as we get closer to the sabbatical date, but I'm hoping that folks will gather in small groups over meals and talk about it. So I didn't want to give you like, here's a big thing, because I'm wanting everyone to rest. And I know all too well how much you all already have going on. So the goal is to not add to the burden of ministry here in this time of sabbatical rest. But as I'm thinking about the next phase of ministry, the next 10 years, you know, what comes after this particular pivot point, you know, the questions that I'm going to be wanting to talk and have answered or to explore together when I get back is, well, what do we think our next 10 years is looking like? What's our future together? And so the coming to this neighborhood meetings will be a time to kind of re-engage and connect, but I still hope to have what we might think of as another round 2 of listening sessions, you know, because we have come to where we are by listening deeply to each other and to what God is doing in our midst. And I'm going to want to do that too, to think about, well, here's what I might imagine the next 10 years for us, but I want to hear what we imagine the next 10 years to be, and for us to be rested enough to have that conversation in a fruitful way. So that's a little bit of what I hope for. There's a question from Michael McGraw asking, will the meetings regarding the discernment process of Northern Indiana and Indianapolis reunification be on hold without you or continue under the leadership of canons? So great question, Michael McGraw. So that process of reunification conversations, that will continue. So that was one of the things that we talked about briefly, Bishop Doug Sparks and I. He had taken part of his sabbatical last spring, and we knew my sabbatical would be coming this year. We're gathering with the Reunification discernment team in March in order to launch them. But the reality is that the discernment on reunification is not centered around the bishops. So we want to be there to launch it, but I'm not expected to be at all of those meetings anyway. So that process will lay itself out and continue. And when I come back in September, I expect that I will jump into whatever the discernment team has decided we're doing or talking about. So one of the things I'm learning about this letting go piece of sabbatical is like, I'm really having to just let go. So I don't know where that's going to be when I come back, but I trust our diocese, and I trust the Spirit to land us in a place where I can re-enter and join the conversation with all of you. Trying to think, I think, that's, the bishop has got a lot of space. I take up a lot of space in a lot of ways, but there's a lot that can happen without a bishop. And I'm expecting that y'all will continue to do some of those important conversations and bits of work. Yuri asked about whether, I see, Kristen, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, everyone, I was trying to get that article out to all of you, and thought that I had followed the right trail of breadcrumbs to get it loaded so that it was a shareable link. And instead it's apparently a restricted link. So I'm going to work on that. And worst case scenario, if I don't have something that's accessible to you by the end of the call, I will email it out to everybody who was on the call. So you'll get it. And I'm working on it right now. So thanks for your patience.
It's kind of like your sort of your gift bag for coming to the chat, because everyone's going to get it eventually, but you get to get it early. So it's kind of a nice thing. So there will not be bishop visitations while I'm on sabbatical. And again, that's one of those things that, I weighed and talked a little bit about with our little sabbatical planning team. And we had our meeting a few months ago. It's like, should we have visitations? But one of the things I thought was that the summertime tends to be slow anyway, and we could probably, anticipating the sabbatical time, about a year ago, we made the decision to kind of elongate this cycle of visitations by about 6 months to take into account the fact that there would be a period where I would not be making visitations. And so it typically takes about 18 months or so for me to get around to every congregation and ministry in the diocese. And we scheduled it out so that it's about a 2-year spread at this period right now. So we're beginning, I think, Janet, right? We're going to start looking at the 2024 cycle in the next couple of months. So before I go on sabbatical, might be helpful information. Before I go, you'll know what the 2024 and 2025-ish visitation calendars will look like. So for those of you who like to plan ahead, we'll have those dates out before I go. Okay, other things. Information. Is there any information to share on discernment of our relationship at the table, and does that go on sabbatical with you? So we have some of the members from the table congregation here on the Zoom, and we're going to continue doing the work of knitting our body together with the table and our diocese. And so that doesn't go on sabbatical either. So like, that's, it's a funny thing. There are lots of things that can continue to happen for the 4 short months I'll be away, but that is not one of them. One of the things I really hope for is that when I come back, well, let me just say this, there's the calendar is just, this is a crazy year. Like last year was crazy in a different way. This year is crazy because of the compression of some of the calendar bits, such that we're beginning to plan for 24 because 2023 is already spoken for, like almost to the last day of the year. Everything is calendared out because of the way we compress things to work around sabbatical months. But what I'm most looking forward to is convention in November, where if things go to plan and discernment and all of the things, that we will be able to celebrate some of the progress we've made with the congregations from the table and our diocese coming together. So that, and perhaps St. Luke's Candleton will celebrate that. There'll be a number of celebrating some of the work of reconciliation that we've been, and conciliation that we've been doing. And so I expect convention to have that spirit to it. But that's only going to happen if the things that need to happen while I'm gone continue to work in process. And Ken and Kristen and Brendan will continue to shepherd that while I'm gone. So folks on the table, like, stay tuned. We have a meeting coming up before we go on sabbatical. That's one of the things that I wanted to make sure we took care of. And so a lot of in-person meetings to sort of make sure there's a touch base opportunity before I'm out of the system, just so that we can continue to clarify the questions and to make sure that we're all on the same page, so that when I leave, I know that we're all clear about how things will continue while I'm gone. Any other questions about that in particular? I know, as I say, Matt Spencer and Mary Ellen will have some time to talk about it before I go. All right. Anything else you wonder about?
Bishop, I have a question. This is Father Matt
Yeah.
from the table.
Oh, yes, you are.
Hi. I may have missed this in the communications, and it may be too premature to speak about this with clarity. But if the reunification of the diocese in Indiana happened, what does the episcopate look like over that diocese? Is it both of you? Is it one of you? Is there a vote? How does that work?
Not quite sure exactly, except there are inner workings I don't know, but these are the things I know for sure. I will still be a bishop here. And the idea is that, I think very, at the most basic level, the idea of if we were to vote to reunify, like there's this liminal time that we'll be together, and bringing the conversation and the question at this moment in time was done because we wanted to be able to have the conversation while both bishops were still in place. So I don't know what the length of time is, but if we were to vote to reunify and have all the consents and all of that happen, my sense is that there would be 2 bishops operating in the state of Indiana for some period of time, which I'm not sure what the length of that would be. But if it's helpful to hear, though, when I talk about the next period of time as being your bishop and being healthy and energized for that work in the next 10-year horizon, I'm assuming that whatever comes with reunification or not, that I will be here. So knock wood, and healthy and all of those things. But yeah, we'll see. I know it's one of the things that I feel like is my own spiritual work of, again, trust and letting go, is that there are lots of really big things that we're talking about right now. It is a big conversation around possible reunification, incorporating new congregations into the life of the diocese, figuring out like how do we come out of the remnants of the pandemic, all of that. And one of the things I'm hoping we'll understand is that there is never a perfect time to take sabbatical and to step away. there's always big work to do. And so if I waited, or we waited, like it might never happen because there's such substantial work to do. So this is part of like, okay, like if I did not have the trust and confidence in all of us to do the work without me in the middle of it, I wouldn't, I mean, I would be a crazy person, number one, because then I'd be a super control freak. But I also just know that like, this is a healthy way of going forward and being able to make sure that like everyone who's leading in the appropriate space is able to do that. And I don't have to be in the middle of all of that. So so there's a bit of this interesting sense of letting go and also being excited for what I'll find on the other side of sabbatical. Like I'm going to have some things to tell you about, you know, like I went running over here and I explored belonging with this really funky group over here. And you're going to tell me about all the things that you've been up to. And I'm going to have my own really big catch-up work to do. So I'm actually kind of excited for that. C. Davies.
So to that end, how much in your planning to be away, what sort of plan do you have for returning? Because coming back in isn't just hit the door the first day and you're back to full speed. There's got to be a ramp up.
Well, so here's my thing. I didn't actually plan on my return as well as I might have, because what I'm coming back to is like jumping straight in. So I know, but so here's the shape of it. So just to give you a sense of it, and you know, we'll put some of this out too. The month of May is mostly, and also you should know, I've got a 6th grader in the house, right? So a lot of my decisions are based on the school calendar, which does not change. So Timothy will still be in school. And so I'm going to be fairly close to home being mom while he finishes up the school year. And there's always a lot of activities with that. And so I look forward to being around for some of that, traveling up to Chicago for some road races. I'm going to do the Flying Pig 10K in Cincinnati at the end of May. So like, those are things I've been really looking forward to, but those are designed to keep me fairly close to home. June is the month that we'll see significant travel time. That's the time when we expect to be in the UK for a couple of weeks as a family, and then coming back in time for me to drive Timothy to camp in Maine, where he'll be for a month. And then while he's at camp, I'll do some other resting and traveling on my own, I think. And then I'll come back in August, you know, there's July, which I'll have some of that same rhythm. And then in August, Timothy goes back to school. So I'll be around doing all the back to school activities and being present for that part of life. And so that, to me, August begins my sort of shifting and, you know, sort of setting my face back towards the work, not jumping into it, but easing into it that way. Because what happens in September is that it's kind of full on things, commitments, both within the diocese and beyond the diocese. House of Bishops meetings are on the calendar. I'm leading a retreat in Connecticut. There's all of these things, some of which are my own doing and other things were out of my control. And so I feel like I'll come back and it's just jumping right in. But I'm hoping that I'll be ready for all of that by the time I get to that. But wanting to make sure what we've been tending to in the office is making sure that the time to get back up to speed with staff is more generous, and having time where there are days that don't have anything else on the calendar, on the schedule, but meeting one by one with each staff person on the bishop staff and getting caught up, and then having time together as a whole staff to reunite the team that way. And then, as I mentioned, the clergy day that we typically do in September, and then those neighborhood meetings. But yeah, there'll be a lot, because the fall is a busy time. So some of it's just like that's the time that I re-enter, and that's the time when we're gearing up with all our ministries. So I'll be present to all of that. Sean.
Hi, Bishop. I've often wondered about this. When a bishop goes on sabbatical, what happens with your colleagues in the House of Bishops? Are you basically on a blackout? You know, you're not getting anything from them. They're not hearing from you. I mean, you're completely out of the loop for all of that at that level as well as in the diocesan. Is that correct?
That's correct. So, I mean, there are several bishops I found out who are taking sabbatical. and about the same time, but I won't be getting work emails, so I don't know what they're going to be talking about, but there's a House of Bishops meeting in September, and I suspect I will jump back in the flow when I go to that. One of the things that is only recent in the wisdom of the House of Bishops is that they had a sabbatical planning workshop last fall, which I couldn't go to because my calendar was already filled up. I was like, where was this a year ago? Like, it would have been helpful to have. And so I will say that there is some practical wisdom coming from the House of Bishops and the College for Bishops to help bishops and dioceses think through some things. And so when I met with our little sabbatical planning team, we had this whole planning document to help us think about the kinds of questions to be asking and the kinds of things to be preparing for. So that's how I come to the thinking about, well, what is the next 10 years? How do we come back together? How do we tend to staff and lay leaders as I come back into the system after sabbatical? And so I found that to be really, really helpful. And welcome Bishop Antoine from Rwanda. Glad you're here. So yeah, so I think there's a sense that if there's anything that happens so significant in the life of the church and the House of Bishops that I need to know, I'm sure I'll find out. Some of the bishops are my friends, you know, I mean, so I hope to actually see some of them for fun things. And I'm hoping to go hang out with this running group called Run 313 in Detroit. And so when I do that, I'll go see Bishop Bonnie in Michigan. So, you know, I won't be completely like, I don't want to talk to another bishop ever, because that would be weird. A lot of the folks in the House of Bishops have been friends of mine for a long time. So I'm hoping to not talk church, but to just really play. All right, Bishop Antoine. Oh yes, Bishop. Sorry, Catherine. Yeah.
Yeah. Bishop, first of all, your plans are incredibly inspiring to me. I don't think I would be able to do what you're doing. It takes a lot of courage to lead, even if it's just temporary. But it occurred to me as you were talking about the question that you're going to be exploring of how groups form identity and belonging outside of the church, that at a very different level, we'll be undertaking a very similar question as we continue the conversation about reunification on an institutional level, about identity and belonging. So we have a lot of work to do too. Enjoy.
Yeah. That's right. Thank you for raising that. It's funny because I'm thinking, I think I knew that, but you know, that's my hope is that knowing that nothing is ever wasted, right? Like all of these engagements and conversations will find themselves to have some use. And certainly those questions, which are deep questions of Christian community, I hope would be helpful in that conversation. So yeah, well, when I come back on the other side of sabbatical, I look forward to hearing what y'all have been up to. As some of you may know, Catherine Tyler Scott is one of our members of the Discernment Reunification team. So she's got a particular ear to those things. Really grateful for your service there. All right. Oh, there you go. And Kristen's just posted the article. It's wonderful. Thank you, Kristen and Janet, for making that possible. Some of you know the community of the Society of St. John the Evangelist in Cambridge and other parts of Massachusetts. It's been a part of my spiritual nurture. And so this article that is being shared comes out of a connection that's been deeply important to my own spiritual life for about 20 years now. So it's the place where I go for regular retreat, and my spiritual director is a monk in that community. And so I'm hoping that the questions and the way that they're being posed here will sort of also give you a window into the ways in which I'm sped spiritually. It's not a random article. It's something that's embedded deeply in the community that has helped form me as a Christian and as a priest and now bishop. Well, I think there are no other questions. I'll say this, this is again designed for us to have this initial conversation. There will be lots of other information coming, and particularly for those of you who have leadership roles, just know that this was an opportunity for us just to have some open dialogue, but there is nothing that we've shared that will not be written down and codified somewhere for you to be able to share with the communities of which you're a part. What I want this to be is something that's transparent, that people are able to engage and ask questions about. And if other things come to mind after this call where you go, oh my gosh, what about this other thing? Please, you can always send me a note or be in touch, but you've got a deadline on it. Don't ask me on May 1. This is you want to come up with whatever these questions are in the next few months. And I'll do my best to get back to you quickly. But again, the reclaiming Sabbath and sabbatical time as a healthy part of our diocesan life is probably the second most important part of this for me. We're blessed to have resources through the Lilly Endowment and the clergy renewal program that allows parish clergy to take sabbaticals on a regular basis, and that's a wonderful thing. And so we already start off on a really good foundation for this. But I'm aware that the minute I begin to think I'm indispensable, and then we're in trouble. So it's really important that we all learn how to sort of step back and then to come back together again as a part of our ongoing spiritual health. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for being here. If you've got the ability to get outside and get some fresh air before the sun begins to set, please go and do that. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and I look forward to seeing you around the diocese. Blessings and peace to you.